Hi everyone. I hope that you're all doing well and a long time no see. I am feeling much better from my little brief stint of pneumonia, and I am back to share another book review with you. Now, this book review is going to be over the course of several days because I'm still kind of fatigued from working my 2 jobs and also recovering from the pneumonia. So I'm not going to overexert myself too much. But the book that I'm going to be reviewing, I got from my local bookstore. And the title of this book is called The Shallows: What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. And it was written by Nicholas Carr. Now, mind you, this book is the first, edition of the book. It was published in 2010. So it was about maybe 15 years ago. And a lot of the stuff in here is still relevant, but some of the systems that he mentioned is obsolete now. But there is a second edition. I don't remember what year it was published. But if you're going to get the book, I would say get the second edition because maybe he'll explain more how things have changed since his first book and all of that. But yes, before I get into the author and the book review, I just wanted to share with you why I selected this book. And it was two incidents that happened. The first incident happened maybe a month or two ago. I was sitting on the bus or on the train. I cannot remember. I was going somewhere and I was reading a book. And for some reason, I guess I was tired. It was hard to see the text, maybe because I was tired. And my book was away from me like this. It was this distance. So instead of bringing the book closer to my face, which is too much like sense, I decided that I was going to zoom into the book like a smartphone. I went like this. I went like this. As if the text was just gonna zoom in for my eyes like a phone. The moment I did that, I almost dropped my book. I literally said, "Oh my God, no you didn't." I was so floored at myself. I was so embarrassed. I'm so glad nobody saw it. I don't think anybody would have noticed, but I was embarrassed for myself because that showed me how little I knew of myself and honestly how little I had control over my own brain and how little control I had over being programmed by society. I've never really considered myself a very digital person. There was a time where I was on social media all of the time, and I got off mostly Facebook because, number one, I had a lot of just people, creepy stalker people. That was one. But the main reason I left Facebook, well, I go on there twice a year. Well, 3 times a year I get on Facebook and I'll be like, hey, I'm alive, and then I'll deactivate. But I left because it was so toxic. It was just people arguing all day long about the most asinine things. Just like, why are we arguing? This doesn't make any sense. So I cut off I cut off Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I don't have Blue Sky. I do not have X. The closest digital thing that I have to social media is this YouTube channel. And I'm not really even posting stuff every day. But I thought I was the type of person that had control over my own mind. I thought that I could thrive in a digital world and still have my my personal power. But that day that I zoomed in on my own book, I said what is it doing to me? What has technology done to my mind? What has it done to other people's minds as well? The second incident was when I got very ill, or when I was starting to get ill with the pneumonia, and I couldn't do anything. I could barely walk. I was so tired, and I'm still kind of tired, still kind of recovering from it. And I felt useless laying in bed all day. I just wanted to be doing something productive. I instead of healing, which is probably the most productive thing I could have ever done. But it made me really slow down and start reflecting on lots of things. I started reflecting on my life. I started reflecting on how I treat myself, how I treat my body, how I let my lifestyle run down my physical body for the pursuit of what? Money? Okay, that's not important. And because I slowed down, I realized how fast the world was moving. The world moves so fast that it forgets to enjoy life. We sacrifice the the comforting slowness of life for the speed of convenience. And in that sacrifice, we lose something of ourselves. We lose something that is ours, that you can't get from a machine. You cannot replicate it with technology. It's something that has a soul. So I started by reading this book, and I started gathering materials that talked about the power of the brain, and also how to live a life without technology. I have one book over there. I don't know. In Pursuit of Slowness is one book I got. Limitless by Jim Quick. It's the expanded edition. I'm reading this one right now. This one I have not read. I got it from my local bookstore. It's called The Revenge of the Analog, Real Things and Why They Matter. David Sachs. Now, my relationship with technology has always been a rocky one. As a child, yes, I would play with technology as far as like video games and toys, but when it came to my education, I felt intruded upon. I could not stand technology in school. I had computer classes in kindergarten. I was at my daycare, but when I got to just like upper grades, I felt like technology was trying to force me to a path that I really didn't want to go. It started in elementary school. I would handwrite my essays and turn them in. I would write them very neatly. I would staple them or put a paper clip and turn it in. And my teacher said, Kiara, you can't write your essays anymore. They have to be typed. So I had a typewriter, and I would type my essays on the typewriter. Pretty soon I couldn't use my typewriter. I had to move to a computer. And at that time, 3rd grade, I didn't understand the power of the internet. I didn't understand the power of computer until I was forced to take computer classes. I had to take typing classes and computer classes. And one day, one of my classmates mentioned the internet. And I said, what is the internet, or what is the World Wide Web? I think it was my friend Brandon. Yeah. He's like, the internet, it has everything. I said, everything? He's like, yeah, it has everything. But I really didn't understand the brevity of that moment. Even when I got my first email, getting my first email address, and changing how you listen to music, the iPods, it was all just pushing me along. I think one of the final straws for me, there were 2 final straws where I was just done with technology. First one was when we had to use a smartboard. I'm a person that really hates chalkboards. I will take a dry erase board over a chalkboard any day. But in high school, it was 10th or 11th grade, my teacher said, hey everyone, we have a smartboard. I said, what is a smartboard? She said, it's a digital chalkboard. I'm like, what's wrong with a chalkboard? She's like, but this is better than a chalkboard. You can upload this and do. I was like, oh, okay. And then in adulthood, when I could not turn in my resume on paper, that was really the final straw for me. You had to make a LinkedIn, you had to apply online. No more resume paper where you had to print it off on resume paper, because they don't want it. Even if you handed them your resume, they don't want it because it's not sent through the system. So all these years, I could never figure out what was missing. What was it that made now, with all of this technology and all of these conveniences, seem so unsatisfying? Until recently, I visited the guy that I like out of town, and he is a social media butterfly. Like, he's on all these different platforms. He makes all these videos. He'll post every day. He'll always have his phone. And when I went to visit him, I brought my laptop because I was still kind of trying to transition away from technology, but I was working on projects for both of my jobs. So I was working, and when I was done, I shut my computer and I would just read a book. And I would just sit there and read in silence. Now, he has a vast library too, not as vast as mine, but it's a nice size. And I think it threw him off that I was so quiet. I was just sitting there. It's like, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. They're like, oh, okay. I think we have been programmed to always be doing something. Not that people take offense that you're quiet or you're just over here doing something. It's just we're so used to being stimulated by outside forces that if we aren't, we have severe anxiety. And that's why I think these children now, these upcoming Gen Z children, are having anxiety, but they don't know why. So I don't want to close my my computer to go read this author's bio, but I guess I'll go on my phone. I actually had it over there because I just didn't want to look at it. But I wanted to share with you the biography of Nicholas Carr. As I know this one, it was published in 2010. It's probably outdated. But this guy has actually come out with a new book this year that I think I may read. It's called Super Bloom. And I feel my wild guess from the title is that it's like a continuation of The Shallows. Yeah, so this is what it says. I'm going to Wikipedia. Sorry. His name is Nicholas G. Carr. He was born 1959 and is an American journalist and writer who has published books and articles on technology, business, and culture. And this book right here was a finalist for the 2011 Pulitzer Prize in General Nonfiction. He went to Dartmouth College and Harvard University. He came into prominence with the 2003 Harvard Business Review article, IT Doesn't Matter, and the 2004 book, Does IT Matter? Information Technology and the Corrosion of Competitive Advantage. In these widely discussed works, he argued that the strategic importance of information technology in business has diminished as IT has become more commonplace, standardized, and cheaper. His ideas roiled the information technology industry, spurring heated outcries from executives of Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, and other leading technology companies, although the ideas got mixed responses from other commenters. Yeah, that sounds true. And I'm not even an IT person, but I feel like the more advanced the internet becomes, or technology becomes, the less advanced we become. We're not using all of our faculties. Then it says his education. He holds a BA from Dartmouth College and an MA in English and American Literature and Language from Harvard University. And some of the books that he's written are Digital Enterprise, How to Reshape Your Business for a Connected World, Does IT Matter? The Big Switch, Rewiring the World from Edison to Google, The Glass Cage, Automation and Us, Utopia is Creepy and Other Provocations, and Super Bloom, How Technologies of Connection Tear Us Apart. So that is Nicholas G. Carr. So this book, it took a little while to read. I was forcing myself to slow down and read because I was trying to read quickly and not enjoy the process. And what's really interesting about this book is not only how well written it is, but it made me think of all of the books that I came across when I worked in the library and the books that I've written now. The layout is different, the words so different. The words back then had, I guess the vocabulary was of like higher nature and the text was more condensed. Right now, the way text has been laid out in books, it's like skimming. It's almost like reading a double-spaced essay, but it's bound as a book, which is interesting. So he starts off in I'm trying to think. It was in chapter 1, he talks about Hal and me. And Hal is this character in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. Bowman, having nearly been sent to a deep space death by the malfunctioning machine HAL, is calmly, coldly disconnecting the the memory circuits that control Hal's artificial brain. Dave, my mind is going, Hal says. Forlornly, I can feel it. I can feel it. And then the author says, I can feel it too. Over the last years, I've had an uncomfortable sense that someone or something has been tinkering with my brain, remapping the neural circuitry, reprogramming the memory. My mind isn't going, so far as I can tell, but it's changing. I'm not thinking the way I used to think. I feel it most strongly when I'm reading. I used to find it easy to immerse myself in a book or a lengthy article. My mind would get caught up in the twists of the narrative or the turns of the argument, and I'd spend hours strolling through long stretches of prose. That's rarely the case anymore. Now my concentration starts to drift after a page or two. I can relate to this because once I started thinking about how technology has altered me, when I was even trying to read this book, it felt like my brain was spazzing. It would focus and then it would go, okay, I'm over here. What is that over there? What is that over there? Hey, did you check your email? Have you checked it today? It was just really creepy. And I realized, I'm like, if this is what's going on where my attention span is being butchered, I need to start doing things that lengthen my attention span. I need to start doing things that are physical. First time I noticed this thing that the author was going through was when I worked with children. Around the time when I stopped working with them in 2011, 2013. A lot of these children couldn't focus on anything. They couldn't finish a puzzle. They couldn't finish a drawing. They couldn't finish a book. It almost seemed physically painful to even finish anything. Why? He answers that in his book. He says, for well over a decade, I've been spending a lot of time online searching and surfing, and sometimes adding to the great database of the internet. The web's been a godsend to me as a writer. The net has become my all-purpose medium, the conduit for most of the information that flows through my eyes and ears and into my mind. He says, the boons are real in response to a quote, the perfect recall of silicone memory can be an enormous boon to thinking. So essentially what he's saying is that if you rely too much on technology, you're going to be losing something. One example is if, God forbid, somebody lost their sense of hearing. So now your sense of hearing is gone. That means your other faculties have to amplify themselves. Your sight gets better. Your sense of smell gets better. Your sense of touch gets better to compensate for what was missing. When you rely on technology as a crutch, you free up all of the other faculties that you would have used to navigate in this world. But the more you use these technologies, the weaker that part of yourself can become. Or there's a break in its fluidity. He also talked about when he bought his first computer in 1990. And as he shares the story of his computers and all the computers he had, he says by the mid-90s, I had become trapped, and not unhappily, in the upgrade cycle. And he speaks about how he had to keep upgrading and upgrading and upgrading and upgrading all of his computers. And some of the systems that he used were obsolete. Because that's what technology does. is always changing. There's nothing that stays the same because it really honestly is not real. It's not permanent. It's impermanent. I can make something with my hands that lasts thousands of years, but I can't put whatever like CD-ROM that I have from 20 years ago into a laptop now. My laptop doesn't even have any room for a CD-ROM. There's no little, I can't even burn a CD anymore. They just made it obsolete for most of these laptops, if that makes any sense. But yeah. And he says, you know the rest of the story, because it's probably your story too. Ever faster chips, ever quicker modems, DVDs and DVD burners, Napster, Blackberries. When the web went 2.0 around 2005, I went 2.0 with it. And hey everyone, it is the very next day, and we are continuing with my book review. But before I get into the continuation, I wanted to show you two things. So one thing that I have been doing is I have been trying to make my life more analog, and I have been incorporating activities that I consider analog, so I will not be scrolling on my computer or scrolling on my phone or just being easily distracted. So one thing that I've started doing again is crocheting. Right now I'm crocheting a blanket for my friend. I put the colors that I know that they like in here. I am not a master crocheter. I've never made a blanket before. I don't really know how to crochet like that, so I've just been practicing every night before I go to bed. I've been practicing on my crocheting, so that way I can build up my concentration and focus on a task. This is, I want to say this is double stitch or triple stitch. I really don't know. If I keep practicing, I'm going to learn how to make all those fancy stitches, but all I know are single stitch and double stitch, and that's it. It's starting to turn. I don't know if I've made a straight line, but it's going to look like something in the end. Also, I didn't know what else to do to make my life more analog, so I decided that I would just go to the internet, because who would know better about living a digital free life than the digital world? And I printed off a template of different ways to make my life digital free, things I would need to stop doing, things I would need to replace or change, things I would need to start doing, and different phases that I have to go through in order to have a 100% digital free lifestyle. Now, honestly, I won't be able to do that unless I move out and become a hermit somewhere or go with a community that doesn't use any type of technology. My life is already infiltrated with technology, even though I really don't want it that way. But I'm going to try to incorporate some of the suggestions that the internet came up for me. And I might record it as I go along. I'm really not sure. But back to the book. In chapter 7, the author goes into detail exactly how the internet does change your brain. And chapter 7 is called The Juggler's Brain. He says, what can science tell us about the actual effects that internet use is having on the way our minds work? No doubt, this question will be the subject of a great deal of research in the years ahead. Dozens of studies by psychologists, neurobiologists, educators, and web designers point to the same conclusion. When we go online, we enter an environment that promotes cursory reading, hurried and distracted thinking, and superficial learning. It's possible to think deeply while surfing the net, just as it's possible to think shallowly while reading a book, but that's not the type of thinking the technology encourages and rewards. One thing is very clear. Knowing what we know today about the brain's plasticity, you were set out to invent a medium that would rewire our mental circuits as quickly and thoroughly as possible. You will probably end up designing something that looks and works a lot like the internet. And he talks about neuroplasticity in the earlier part of the book. A lot of people in the past believed that once your brain reached a certain age, there was nothing more you could do to it. You couldn't get any smarter. You couldn't change it. You couldn't alter your ways. It was just set in stone, kind of like a brick. But the brain, metaphorically, is not like a brick. It's more like Play-Doh. Can alter it, you can adapt it, you can change its shape as you gather information. Sometimes, God forbid, you have a brain injury, it also alters the brain as well. So there's different ways that you can alter your brain for the better. There's different systems that you can train your brain to concentrate more or to amplify one part of it and suppress another part of it. The brain is a very powerful organ. And the internet, if you don't know how to utilize it carefully, can become like a crutch. I was thinking recently about how I used to look up library books in the past. I would use the card catalog. And this didn't hit me until recently when I was at the library typing in the titles, looking for something, and I thought to myself, didn't I used to do this in a different way as a child? And lo and behold, I had completely forgotten that you had to go to the little catalog drawer, look through all the little cards in order to find the books, in order to find the title. I don't know if there's libraries that still use that, but we just made it so convenient. We don't have to work as hard to find something now. If we're going to research, there's a plethora of information on the web. All we have to do is go on there and find it. Internet articles, essays, EBSCO all of the different things at your fingertips. You don't have to just go to the library and sit there for hours going through 20 different books. You could sit in one space with one laptop and get it. But at the end of the day, what's going to be more memorable? Yes, you could read a series of internet articles, but a lot of them are going to slip your mind. But when you have physical contact with a book, you're going to remember, most likely. It says, it's that the net delivers precisely the kind of sensory and cognitive stimuli, repetitive, intensive, interactive, addictive, that have been shown to result in strong and rapid alterations in brain circuits and functions. With the exception of alphabets and number systems, the net may well be the single most powerful mind-altering technology that has ever come into general use. At the very least, it's the most powerful that has come along since the book. He also mentions about books earlier in this book, about the history of the book, how it went from words and markings written on pieces of bone and strips of fabric and bits of rock to tablets, to scrolls, to papyrus, and then the codex, and now the e-reader or the Kindle or the Nook, whatever form of e-reading that you do, audiobooks as well, is altered as technology has altered, but we still have the same form, of course. You have the codex, it's bound, it's batteries, there's none, so I don't have to plug it in. If I set it somewhere and 20 years later I can come back and it's probably will still be there. Might be in weird condition, but the words are still going to be there. My technology will not be obsolete because this technology is thousands of years old. He says, the net also provides a high-speed system for delivering responses and rewards, positive reinforcements in psychological terms, which encourage the repetition of both physical and mental actions. When we click a link, we get something new to look at and evaluate. So that's why I knew I had a problem when I was trying to zoom in on a book. Zoom in like my book was a smartphone. My brain had been trained to interact with a physical book as if I'm interacting with the World Wide Web. He says, our use of the internet involves many paradoxes, but the one that promises to have the greatest long-term influence over how we think is this one. The net seizes our attention only to scatter it. We focus intensively on the medium itself, on the flickering screen, but we're distracted by the medium's rapid fire delivery of competing messages and stimuli. Whenever and wherever we log on, the net presents us with an incredibly seductive blur. Human beings want more information, more impressions, and more complexity, writes Torkel Klingberg, the Swedish neuroscientist. We tend to seek out situations that demand concurrent performances, or situations in which we are overwhelmed with information. If the slow progression of words across printed pages dampened our craving to be inundated by mental stimulation, the net indulges it. It returns us to our native state of bottom-up distractedness, while presenting us with far more distractions than our ancestors had ever had to contend with. That's just very sad. This is the peak example of monkey mind. Like in meditation, where they're like, you have to ignore the monkey mind. You have to handle the monkey mind. The internet is the monkey mind. And I mentioned earlier about how the children coming up, much like the ones I worked with in the past, their attention span is butchered. They can't focus. They can't finish things. And I think it goes beyond giving them phones when they're 1 year old. Because people be like, oh, let the baby play with the phone, and the baby knows how to figure out your phone. The baby knows how to interact with the phone. I think it goes deeper than that. I think they already know in the womb. Like epigenetics. We've used technology so much, something must have altered in us where we come out and it's just like interacting with nature or something. We're just adept at this technology. It's easier to interact with at an earlier age. And maybe that's why the children's attention spans are all over the place, because we've just changed ourselves on such a genetic level where we won't need this long, lengthy attention span. Now, in the past, and he mentioned this earlier in the book, in this chapter called Tools of the Mind. What chapter is this? It was chapter 3. And in chapter 3, he talks about this story of Socrates and Plato. And no, I've actually read this before, but I'm going to read it again. It's basically the It's a conversation between thought I don't know if it's Thoth or Thought. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Early in the 4th century BC, when the practice of writing was still novel and controversial in Greece, Plato wrote Phaedrus, his dialogue about love, beauty, and rhetoric. In the tale, the title character, a citizen of Athens, takes a walk with the great orator Socrates into the countryside, where the two friends sit under a tree beside a stream and have a long and circuitous conversation. They discuss the finer points of speech making, the nature of desire, the varieties of madness, and the journey of the immortal soul, before turning their attention to the written word. There remains the question, muses Socrates, of propriety and impropriety in writing. Phaedrus agrees, and Socrates launches into a story about a meeting between the multi-talented god, I guess it's Thought or Thoth. I'm just going to call him Thoth, whose many inventions included the alphabet, and one of the kings of Egypt, Thamus, or Tamus? I don't know. So the king of Egypt is talking to the god, and Thoth is trying to convince the king that writing will be good for the Egyptians of the Kemetic people, and that they should be allowed to share in its blessings. It will, he says, make the people of Egypt wiser and improve their memories, for it provides a recipe for memories and wisdom. But the king disagrees, and he says, O man full of arts, to one is it given to create the things of art, and to another to judge what measure of harm and of profit they have for those that shall employ them. And so it is that for you, by reason of the tender regard for the writing, that is your offspring, have declared the very opposite of its true effect. Should the Egyptians learn to write, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. They will cease to exercise memory, because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. Now, this is coming from an oral society. A lot of societies had oral history. You didn't really have books like that. You just memorized everything, and you would recite it. If you had a story that was a poem, you memorized the poem, and you could just recite it lengths and lines and verses for days. There's some cultures where they had storytellers and his musicians and his history keepers that would memorize the whole history of the tribe or the group, and they would recite it from their mind. How many people can do that today? Maybe one or two. I used to have very wonderful memory. I could memorize verses and lines and recite poems at the drop of a hat. This was when I was a child. And I would go to barber shops and I would recite my poems and sell the art and all of those different things. But that's because I have been trained to do that. It was something that I took pride in. It was something that I practiced on a consistent basis. I would do things with my hands. I would do things the long way. But when convenience came, some of those skills that I had mastered as a youth started to slip away from me, because now I have replaced it with something else. It says, in a purely oral culture, thinking is governed by the capacity of human memory. Knowledge is what you recall, and what you recall is limited to what you can hold in your mind. Through the millennia of man's pre-literate history, language evolved to aid the storage of complex information in individual memory and make it easy to exchange that information with others through speech. Serious thought, Ong writes, was by necessity intertwined with memory systems. Diction and syntax became highly rhythmical, tuned to the ear, and information was encoded in common turns of phrase, what we today would call cliches, to aid memorization. So, going back to what I was saying, as I'm thinking, this is happening in the womb. I don't think when they say, oh, don't hand the baby the phone, it's going to make them distracted. I think the internet has already gotten the baby in the womb, in the genetic line. Our bodies are adapting. We have this technology. It's like, hey, I don't really need to have this part of my brain larger because I'm not using this anymore. So what's the point? I got this technology. And now we have this generation of different thinking brains. That's why I keep coming across this thing online called the Gen Z stare. I don't even know what that is. But apparently it's just like, and I'm not saying this to like Gen Z or anything, but they'd be like, the children just be staring. Just staring at you. You ask them a question, they stare. I don't know, with the Gen Z, the children I worked with, I don't know if they were Gen Z or they were something else. I don't know what they were. But I saw that with those children. Something's not linking. They're staring at the phone. They're staring at the computer. They're staring at a screen. They're staring at a screen at school. They're staring at a screen on their computer, on their television, on their phone, on their watch, on their tablet, on their Kindle. The more we advance, the more we lose if we don't know how to set boundaries. But that's the problem. Boundaries, setting boundaries, hindsight is 20/20. We don't know the damage until the damage is done. And sometimes we don't know when the damage is done until 30 years down the line. Because we're so excited about what is new and what is shiny. The constant distractedness that the net encourages, the state of being, to borrow another phrase from Eliot's Four Quarters, distracted from distraction by distraction. I'm sorry. I'm still recovering, but that was funny as hell. Distracted from distraction by distraction. This is literally my life. That's kind of sad. Is very different from the kind of temporary, purposeful diversion of our mind that refreshes our thinking when we're weighing a decision. The net's cacophony, is that how you pronounce it, cacophony? I don't know. Of stimuli short circuits both conscious and unconscious thought, preventing our minds from thinking either deeply or creatively. Our brains turn into a simple signal processing unit, quickly shepherding information from consciousness and then back out again. I'm just having so many flashes of my interaction with technology where my mind would go blank and I'd all of a sudden don't know what I was doing. Or I'd be walking with my phone and I'd forget where I was going to. It's just very sad. Then there's another chapter which had a lot of highlights because I bought this book used. So chapter 8 is called The Church of Google. And the person that had this book before me highlighted a bunch of stuff in this chapter, only this chapter, no other one. So I'm going to go over some of the things this person highlighted. Did they even sign their name at the front? No. So I don't know who it belonged to. One of the things they highlighted was, in the past, the man has been first. And somebody named Taylor declares this. Taylor I don't know, Frederick Winslow Taylor. He is actually the one that um, started the algorithm. He was very, okay, he was an influential figure during the Industrial Revolution. He basically emphasized like program management, Kaizen method. He wrote the principles of scientific management, basically for factory workers. He said once as a system was applied to all acts of manual labor, Taylor assured his many followers it would bring about a restructuring not only of industry but of society, creating a utopia of perfect efficiency. In the past, the man has been first, he declared. In the future, the system must be first. See, that's where we have a problem. That's why we're having some of the problems we have now. Because we stopped putting ourselves first. We've put something that isn't real before our own human needs. We have put technology on a pedestal like it is a deity or something instead of looking within ourselves. And we feel that this technology is going to overtake us. Well, you know what? You created it. You have power. You're the one with the soul. This thing, no matter how advanced it becomes, it does not have your spark. It does not have your soul. It does not have your power. The internet, this is what the person highlighted. The internet is a machine designed for the efficient automated collection, transmission, and manipulation of information, and its legions of programmers are intent on finding the one best way, the perfect algorithm to carry out the mental movements of what we've come to describe as knowledge work. Google's Silicon Valley headquarters, the Googleplex, is the internet's high church, and the religion practiced inside its walls is Taylorism. That's what they called Frederick Winslow Taylor's ideas. It was basically Taylorism. The company says CEO Eric Schmidt is founded around the science of measurement. It is striving to systematize everything it does. We try to be very data driven and quantify everything. And this is crazy because I actually meet people in real life that do this. But they do it with the human body. I guess they forget that our bodies are not a machine. You can't just experiment with it in any type of way that you want to and not expect it to have a chemical, physical reaction. They think they can reboot their bodies as if it is a machine. You're not a machine. You are flesh and blood and soul and spirit. You are not made of all of these different metals and stuff. You can function without being plugged into a wall. Okay? But I meet people like this every day. This is how ingrained things like Google and technology and all of this have become. Even the words that we use for ourselves, like I've heard people say they needed to reboot their body. They need to reprogram themselves. I'm just like, you mean change your mind? You can change your mind. Even when people are like, I don't watch TV because that's a program. They call it a program because they're programming you. You're still not a computer. It can influence you. I think we need to break away from using words that we use for machines and describe ourselves like it. I think that's the beginning of the end, because that's giving the machine more power than it actually deserves. And it's also diminishing how unique and special we are as living beings. We just need completely different vocabulary because we are not a machine. We are more than that. This is crazy. They had just the whole thing of Google. I had to start reading about them. Talking about tracking their eyes and usability, and then there was, I don't know if it was in this chapter, but it was talking about how Google was basically taking all of these authors' books and putting them online and selling sheets of different things and trying to get every single book in the world, which, I mean, I could see how that could be beneficial to an extent if the author is dead or if it's a historical manuscript. But if the author is still alive, why would you do that? You're basically stealing their bag. And that's why they, got into a lot of lawsuits and all of those things. This chapter also talks about links, and they did a test on people to see if they could comprehend better with a system that didn't have any hyperlinks or a system that had hyperlinks to give more information. And obviously the ones without the hyperlinks perform better in the study. This book was published in 2010, and I literally cannot imagine how Google has changed. It says, Google is a natural vessel for our fears as well as our hopes. Some say Google is God, Sergey Brin has acknowledged. Others say Google is Satan. But, man, this book had so much information in it. And by the end of this book, I wanted to be as far away from any form of computer as possible. I actually became extremely disgusted and very sad by the end of this book, because once I realized, or once it set in what was really happening, I couldn't look at life the same way. I couldn't even look at how people interact with technology the same way. Now I feel really sorry for some people because they cannot survive without their phone, without their internet, without their technology. They just are satisfied running in this hamster wheel of things. I don't know. But we just have to do better. We have to realize that we are not machines. And I'm going to say this again. We are not machines. We need to stop using vocabulary. And I know I'm guilty of this because I've been, I guess, programmed to do that. Use the vocabulary I would use on a machine for myself and for other people. We have to start creating more boundaries. We have to say no to too much internet. Obviously, we've created a society where you can't really function without the digital world unless you're part of a community that doesn't interact with it. So you have to create boundaries within your own life. Start keeping a notebook and seeing how many interactions do you have with the internet on a daily basis. How many times do you check your phone? How many times do you check your smartwatch? How many times do you check your email? But yeah, I would give this book a 5 fudge buckets. I maybe in the future I'll get the second edition. I don't know. I might borrow it from the library just to see what updates he's given. But yeah, I think this was great. I learned a lot and it inspired me to read other things. So thank you for watching, everyone. Have a nice one.